Okay, so the Egg Express. I mean, again, if you saw this last year, it's pretty much the same presentation. I went through the rules this year, and it's all pretty much the same. Interestingly, there's different rules for different grades. So whether you're in 6th to 8th, or 9th to 10th, or 11th and 12th, the rules are just a little bit different. And primarily, it's really just the size of the hoop that the project needs to go through. That's the primary difference, although other differences are kind of minor. So really, again, for those of you that are new, it's really the whole intent is to try to construct a container. Oh, there they are back there. Try to construct a container that will hold as many eggs as possible. Because the scoring is really dictated by the number of eggs in the container and the number of eggs that survive. And I'll show you an example of the score sheet in a little bit. So, but again, the containers have to go through these openings, and they have to go through freely. So for 6th and 8th and 9th and 10th, it's the bigger ring. And remember last year, there were some people that just couldn't squeeze it through, and it was really disappointing to have to disqualify.
We had like 3 teams squish the edges down
Yeah.
in their boxes to get it through, end up breaking their eggs.
Yeah, and they're really not supposed to touch their box before.
Well, that's because the way they were signing them in that day.
Yeah, and that's something we learned as well too. So, and this is the smaller one for the 11th and 12th grade. So this is all angles. So if it comes in and you've got a square box that fits in here, kind of, but it doesn't turn freely in here.
Yeah, the diagonal.
That creates a problem as well. So that's one of the keys. So the whole intent is that the students actually design the package. You can use commercial packages, as you would, if you will, a box or container or something to that effect. Those are legal. There's only really a couple things that you really can't use, and I'll talk about those in a second. If you want to see all the official rules, this is kind of a synopsis of the rules. There's a website here on the handout that you can go to check that out. So what are the material rules? Really, it's just large, fresh, raw, white chicken eggs. Now, last year we did have to disqualify somebody because they used a medium or smaller egg. And again, I really hate disqualifying people, so really got to make sure we use the right size eggs.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
How do you determine the egg size after this thing's been dropped?
Well, usually, hopefully, some survive, right? So when you open up the package, you can see the egg, and you can either weigh it, or a lot of times it's really just kind of by sight. So you really kind of want to make sure that those are the right size. If there's a doubt, we'll weigh it. They have to weigh about 2.4 ounces, something like that, which constitutes a large egg. Just paper tape and masking tape, both non-reinforced, of any width, can be used to seal the packages, but you can't use things like duct tape or Scotch tape and those type of things. Again, you can't treat the eggs. You can't hard boil them, so it makes them harder. Small and medium eggs are out. Duct tape or Scotch tape, we talked about that. Can't use staples on the package. And parachutes or aerodynamic devices are also illegal. And you'll see in some of the rules that the container has to land within a bullseye, for instance. So obviously, if there's a parachute and it drifts away, it's not gonna hit that requirement. Although interestingly enough, on the 9th and 10th grade rules, it really just has to land. So you could argue maybe you could get away with one, but really the rules prohibit it. And again, we have to make sure that there's no dangerous substance in there that could splatter or hurt anybody. So we can't have things like peanut butter or Jello, liquids, fruits and vegetables, that type of thing that could serve as a little bit of projectile. Obviously, no flammable substances or glass. Anything that you could think of that may hurt or splatter in someone's eye or something to that effect is really not allowed. People have asked, you can use things like popcorn. Those types of things are okay, but these types of substances aren't.
Creepy slimy thing you want is the smashed egg.
That's correct. And hopefully you don't get too many of those.
Hopefully not.
Other rules, basically one entry per team, per team, per person. And again, the teams can be up to 2 people in size. The entry must be really clearly labeled. And this is one of the issues that we had last year. And again, it was my first year, so I didn't have all the whole system down. So in cases where the packages weren't clearly labeled, I actually had the students go back and label it. But that really caused a big backup and a backlog of people dropping their projects off. So we really can't do that again this year. So I really encourage you to make sure that these packages are labeled clearly There were even cases where people didn't put their name on the label on the package, and then we're sitting there looking through lab reports and things like that, okay, okay, and matching those up. So, again, pretty important. Again, I don't want to deduct anything. The kids work hard on these things, and I prefer not to take these deductions, but it's really only fair since we all go by the same rules. So, this was a big issue last year, so I decided to make sure that they are clearly labeled. Here's the information that you need to label the packages with. They do have to submit a lab report, and again, we'll talk about lab reports in a little bit more detail in the next couple of slides. Yeah.
Can you give me an idea of what a special instruction for drop-in might be?
Well, for instance, if there's a top and bottom of a package, they might say, okay, this had no top and drop this way, or throw it out a little bit or something to that effect. So if there's anything in particular about the package that needs a special drop instruction. Sure. Again, your package cannot be modified once it's finally dropped off. And I bent this rule considerably last year. I'm not going to be able to do it this year because this year we'll just drop everything off and the kids can go off and drop off other projects or whatever, so we don't backlog. So again, we won't be modifying packages this year. Again, the students must design and construct the package, and again, no hazardous material. If there is hazardous material that we deem in the package or around the package, then we won't drop the package, just for everybody's safety. So here's some of the specific rules for 6th to 8th. Again, we use this bigger measurement to put the package through, and again, even on these bigger ones, we had people that didn't get all the way through it. Again, a lot of it is when you start turning it over. So, you have to have this one is a computer-generated lab report, and the value of that is up to 60 points, and I'll talk to you about a little bit about how that's constructed. And again, this is a little different depending on what the age of the student is. And again, this is one where the container must drop in the landing zone. If you've been there before, there's a kind of big huge bullseye. We drop it out the window, and ideally it lands in that bullseye. I didn't really have any trouble with that last year, but again, if the package gets light or too aerodynamic, it deflates and can fall out of the drop zone. 9th and 10th, again, has to pass freely through that 14-inch diameter hoop. Again, this one doesn't require a computer-generated lab report, really just legible. So if someone has some really good handwriting, I guess that'll suffice. Again, in this case, the total award is 60 points. But in the total scoring, this is one area where 9th and 10th is different. The lab report here only counts for 3 total points of the total score, and I'll talk about the scoring a little bit, where in the other 2 it accounts for 6. So again, 9th and 10th is a little bit different than 6th to 8th and 10th to 11th in terms of how the scoring is done. Again, this one is container must reach the ground. So again, this one's a little bit more nebulous, so there's a little bit more flexibility there, so you can, it doesn't have to hit in a particular target zone, it just really has to hit the ground. Didn't have any trouble with that last year. A lot of them hit the ground. So, again, here's one where they actually specify the weight of the egg. The large weight of the egg is 2.4 ounces. And again, no linear dimension of the container should measure more than 14 inches. And again, that just goes to the ability to freely move a hoop around the package. Was there a question? And 11th and 12th, again, we use the smaller one here, so these packages are much more compact. And then this one is a computer-generated lab report, but again, we divide the total score by 10 instead of 20 on the previous side. So the lab report accounts for 6 points towards the total grade. And again, here the container must land in the drop zone area. Here's a lab report. Again, the important part of the lab report, so we can hook all these things up, is that it's clearly identified who the students are, the school and the grade level that they're from, and the Mesa Center that they represent. And the first part of it, and again, there's more instructions, I think, if you go to the website on kind of what is expected and how these are scored. It's probably worthwhile taking a look at that so we get a feel for what we're looking at when we're actually scoring the lab report. But the initial thing is, what's the problem that the students are trying to solve and what's the goal? So obviously the goal is to construct a package that can hold as many eggs as possible and many eggs survive as possible. Then they'd like to see what's the thought process of the student when they're going through the building of this package. So what was their initial package design? And then, how did you construct it and how did you test it? And a lot of the packages I saw last year, people would drop them off of trees or drop them off the second story window or whatever in their house. Obviously, make sure that they're safe when they're doing that. And then in the process of testing, you're gonna learn, the students are gonna learn some things and they'll modify their design in order to be better overall. So then the final design is 20 points. I think if I remember some of the lab reports from last year, a lot of them missed this kind of test and evaluate stage, and that's where a lot of them got marked off. They kind of went from initial design to end design. So kind of make sure that they touch each one of these areas in the process of designing the package. Judging, again, we'll go through and we'll do the specification check when we do the judge, and that'll be done when they drop these off. We'll make sure that there's no hazard material, we didn't violate any rules per se about how they're put together. Another thing about the tape rule is you can't put Scotch tape on the egg itself, to wrap it up, to give it more protection. They have to be wrapped in something that obviously isn't tape. So we'll check that, we'll check the construction, make sure all the rules have been followed. We'll weigh the package, because in the event that there's a tie, that two projects get the same score, the lightest package will win. So weight is important also in the end. And again, we'll look at the lab report, score the lab report, and add that to the total weight. Yeah.
So, high school, that's school 11th and 12th. That would mean that 50 to 60 points would be one lab report point, because it says the lab report's worth 6 points, so there must be 1 point for every 10 on the scoring.
That's correct, yep.
Okay.
So again, here's the scoring. Like I said, again, talking to that same point, the lab report can be worth up to 6 points. Now, the one exception to that is if you're in 9th and 10th grade, the lab report is 3 points. Not really sure why that distinction is there, because the prizes are given within a grade, so having a different score just gives you a different total in the end. But I guess it's more of weighting of the importance of the lab report versus the importance of the design. You get 1 point for every surviving egg. And to start off with, we take a 1/4 point deduction for each egg in the package. And then a little bit different in the scoring, it's a 1/2 point deduction for the 9th and 10th grade. Again, the point here is to try to get as many eggs in the package as you can to minimize the deduction from there. And then the winner is...
Try that again? I'm still confused about that. If I had 10 eggs in there,
Yeah.
that would be 2.5 point deducted for having 10 eggs in there.
Yep.
But if I have 1 egg in there, it's only a 1/4 point deducted.
That's right. So if you have 10 eggs in there, then you're starting off at a score of 7.5. Right? If you have 1 egg in there, you're starting off at a score of 0.75.
So if more than 3/4 of your eggs survive, you've done pretty good.
Yep. Yeah, it's an interesting scoring system.
Well, the reason why the scoring system is kind of like on this scale is because what happened is you get a kid who would build a project with 4 eggs, and let's say his eggs didn't break, he'd have to be at 100%, where if he had a kid who put 30 eggs in a carton, and then let's say 26 survived, I mean, the kid with the 4 eggs will look like he's a winner, but realistically, who is a far better engineer? So they had to, change the grading scales to match, the quantity of eggs.
And really the intent is to try to get as many eggs in the package as you can and make them survive. And again, we award awards to the first, second, and third place entries in each grade category. So I know this is kind of an eye chart, but this is in your pamphlet as well. This kind of shows you, total number of eggs and the total number of survivors, and kind of quickly to what your score would be. So again, you can see, obviously you want to be on this end, which is the more eggs, and the most that survive.
And this is not a historical prediction of somebody has put 22 eggs in it. This is just a mathematical projection.
Yes, it's just a macro. We're a bunch of engineers, so
I mean,
it's projected
what's the
out.
most you've seen?
I think saw about 15 or 16, I think, last year in the package.
We seen 25 one time, and only one broke.
Wow.
Yeah.
That must have been in the lower with the 14-inch in.
No, that was the big one. And that's why, with that situation, that's why we had to change the rules, because you had a kid who had 3 eggs, none of them broke, and this kid had 25, and only one broke. And so it was just a big, according to the rules,
Point fiasco.
yeah, it was a big problem. So that's why they had to make this sliding scale.
So here's an example of the scoring sheet. There'll be a sheet that comes with each one of the entries that we'll fill out ahead of time, and we'll talk about, mark down how much it weighs. We'll talk about whether it's labeled correctly. Is the container legal? Contents legal? Basically, just go through the whole checklist of scoring on the package. It talks in here about how do you get the deduction and so forth and the score. So in this case, using our example, right? If you have 10 eggs in the package, you lose about 2.5 points. If the drop score, in this case, with 8 surviving eggs, would be a point for each surviving egg, which is 8 points. Let me see if I got this right. That was for yourself. Oh, it's minus 2.5. So you get a score for 8 surviving eggs, and then it's 2.5 because of the deduction for the 10 eggs, which gives you a drop score of 5.5 total. And then in this case, for 6th to 8th and 11th to 12th, you add 6 points if they get a perfect score on the lab report, and the score would be 11.5. So I wanted to, last year was my first year. I learned a lot last year, and again, I think if people have not noticed, when we drop things off, it's a little bit chaotic. One of the big issues that causes to disqualify package was really not fitting in the size, the package size. So again, I'm not sure if you have these available to you or if you can get them, but that's one of the big reasons why people were disqualified last year. Missing or incomplete lab reports was also common. So again, if you don't have a lab report, you get 0 points for your lab report, and that's a big percentage of your total score. So that's an important one. Again, and then poor labeling on the drop container. One of the big ones is lack of egg count. We really got to know how many eggs are in there. So when we drop the package and we pick it up, some of these packages are very well constructed and they're very hard to take apart. So it's very possible that we may miss eggs and so forth. So if you make sure that the students label the number of eggs in the package so that we can make sure to recover all those eggs that are in there. And that's pretty much it. Any other questions? Yeah.
Do you consider rice splatterable material, or can you use rice? Because one time they used it, they were disqualified. Then another time they used it, it was okay.
Yeah, based on that, I would think rice would be a splatterable material.
So don't use it.
Yeah, I would use it. Remember, we're dropping these things from 6 stories up to 6 stories, so those, if the package breaks, they can go a pretty good distance. I mean, a lot of it is kind of really, to some extent, using your best judgment, but anything that you think will hit the ground and will spray and could potentially get in an eye or something like that, I would think about not doing.
I was wondering, is the package just dropped, or do you put a spin on it, or?
Well, if you want me to put a spin on it, but usually people just hang out the window and just drop it.
Okay.
If there's a little bit of a wind, maybe we'll give it a little bit of a push to keep it away from the building, because sometimes the packages drift. And I think a couple of instances last year, the package hit the side of the building, so that's kind of a little bit of a disadvantage to that person. So, depending on what the weather conditions are, we'll give it a little bit of push out to make sure that it doesn't hit the building.
It also depends on which U.S. currency is attached to it as well. So.
Which
Put a
president?
little string on it.
So would you spin it if somebody put in special instructions, spin to the left?
Sure.
Just trying to think of special instructions to keep you guys on your toes.
There you go. I'll look for that. I'm going to keep an eye on you.
I see some students mark it top and bottom so they know that when you drop it, it drops a certain way.
No. I didn't see too many that had specific instructions last year, but You know, again, if it's important, or one side has to go first, again, once you drop it, it's not guaranteed that it'll stay in that orientation, but we'll drop it that way anyway. How about other questions? All right, good.
Does the lab report have to be a specific number of pages?
No, it
No,
really
okay.
has to have the information that,
Okay.
you know, is contained in the thing. I would encourage you to have the students look at the website, so they get a general
Okay.
idea of, kind of what the judges are looking for.
So I know that the eggs can't be wrapped with tape, correct?
That's correct.
So, what if a student, say, they wanted to like put the eggs in like some kind of mold?
Mhm.
Is that okay? It depends on
I've seen that,
the.
you know, as long as that mold isn't kind of, you know, splattered
Yeah.
or something like that. It made a real pain in the neck to
You'd like
take
cut them
one
open.
apart,
Right, okay.
but
What about that?
what about?
You guys gotta take it apart, what if the eggs are stuck to the material? And there's no way to,
We gotta take them out to check them to make sure they're not broken, and if in the process of taking them out, the egg cracks or, you know, a piece comes off the egg, then that's considered a non-survivor, so
so make sure you
make sure I can
practice
get them out.
your testing process and evaluation of how to get them out.
There was one package, I think, that was really well done, and they all survived, I think, but it probably took about 20 minutes just to get them the egg.
You guys a box cutter? Do you get a box cutter just to cut it open, or you have to just by hand?
Yeah, we did have box cutters.
Okay.
Again, we try to be careful because we don't know where the eggs are, right? So we try to be real careful when we cut it open to not slice open an egg or something to that effect.
This year we're gonna include a machete.
How about other questions?
Is it okay to put eggs, like say, each egg in a tiny Ziploc so that if they did splatter, it's okay to just that it's on.
It's been done. I've seen people do
Okay.
that. Again, that's kind of these commercially available containers and stuff. I mean, you can take it to different levels, to the outside, to the inside. I mean, yeah, I've seen people package them in the actual egg containers. They can.
You know, an interesting background to this kind of whole thought is that I teach space tech, and I give them I have the video, but the factual thing is that when we were in the space race, the Russians actually cheated. The concept is the rules were if you went for a height record, you had to come down in the same object that you went up in.
Mm-hmm.
And they cheated because they sent their astronauts, cosmonauts up, and on the way down, they actually did an ejection seat. So they floated down and their craft hit the ground. And then later on, they kept them in there, but they still had an attrition problem with hitting the ground too hard. Even though we splashed in the ocean and they didn't lose anybody. It was kind of fascinating that all their space records were, well, those were wrong. So the rules, international rules of good eggs.
Okay. Other questions? Well, thank you very much for coming out, and I look forward to seeing you students. It was really fun last year. I had a great time. The kids were great, so look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.